another big material, which is a blend of upcycled scrap cotton and thread made from recycled plastic. So what we do is keep our supply chain in South America, meaning none of our manufacturers or suppliers for our raw materials are located anywhere outside of South America. So none of our products are made in Asia, and we don't work with suppliers who we can't find in the Andean region. And the big reason for that is that keeping our supply chain local to the Andes creates a lot of value through each step of that supply chain. So from raw materials to manufacturing to exporting a finished product, there's a lot of skilled labor and opportunity for economic advancement and growth instead of following kind of the global norm, which we refer to sometimes as the race to the bottom or the synthetic epidemic, where brands are taking shortcuts. They're using materials like virgin plastics in their supply chain and virgin polyester, synthetic materials in our clothing, in our products, and manufacturing those things in inexpensive places. And they're also using raw materials from extractive and exploitative economic conditions. So really what we're trying to do is shift the paradigm and raise consumer awareness around what we're buying and what impact that has on the people who are involved in the process of producing that product. So especially in the United States, things are so convenient and easy and accessible for us, but unfortunately that has created sort of a culture of complacency, I think, amongst consumers. And instead of really digging deep into a company and a product before making a decision, we're often sort of just buying what's a few dollars cheaper or what's a little bit more convenient for us to use. So that's sort of the basis for the company, is really sort of fighting against what we see as this global problem.
All that said, what gave you the idea to start doing a company like this and to have such a moral foundation and strategy about how you want to go about it and present it to the people?
So really the inspiration from the company came from my friend and fellow co-founder, Greg Krupa. Greg and I know each other from University of Oregon. And
Go Ducks.
Go Ducks. Originally, Greg, a few years back, was on a climb with his brother's foundation, the Range of Motion Project, which we can talk about in more detail a little bit later. They do these climbs to raise money and awareness for people living with missing limbs or who need access to better prosthetic care. So they climb big mountains in South America with amputees to help raise awareness and, basically show people that people are really not limited by a missing limb, but by a missing prosthetic and access to good prosthetic care. So they were up getting ready for the hike. And if you've ever done a hike on kind of a glacier-capped mountain, you have to start the hike right about midnight. So you want to be hiking before the sun comes up. That means you go to bed, quote unquote, at 6 or 7 p.m. and then get up, at 11:30, get ready for the hike and go. So Greg was laying there and was, in this kind of refuge up on the mountain, trying to go to sleep, and was just freezing cold, with synthetic sleeping bag, synthetic long johns, and merino wool socks, which are still sort of, universally accepted as like the warmest socks out there, even though sheep don't live at high altitudes and aren't naturally really made for that type of environment. And he was thinking earlier in the day they had seen an animal called the vicuña, which is the wild ancestor of the alpaca. The llama has become sort of the domesticated version of the alpaca, and llama and alpaca, look fairly similar, but are still a bit different. All of those animals kind of fall within the camelid family. So the vicuña has the least fur out of either the alpaca or the llama. It's kind of a skinnier looking animal than either one of the alpaca or the llama, and it has much less actual fur. And it lives at the highest altitudes and in the harshest conditions. And he was sort of thinking, how are we not, using or at least imitating the fur from this animal that's adapted to living naturally in these conditions? And that thought of why isn't there a company focused on what we have in the Andes of South America and what we have access to in terms of natural materials, why isn't anyone really focused on that for the basis of their company? So my now wife, Corey Jo, and I had already left, jobs in the United States, and we're traveling and had been in touch with Greg about coming down to Ecuador to see some of the things they were doing. And he pitched kind of that story and that concept to me. And myself, having a background in environmental conservation and also being, an avid hiker and explorer, just sounded like something that would kind of fit a lot of the same values that I already had. From there, he introduced me to our third business partner, Ryan Hood, who's also an Oregon native and living in Ecuador. And the three of us just really clicked, had different strengths and weaknesses, and thought that this could become something. So that's kind of the inspiration and the background for the brand.
And so did you go to Oregon, and did you graduate with an environmental degree of some sort?
My degree was in planning, public policy, and management. We did definitely have classes that were focused on conservation and on climate change, but I didn't specifically study environmental science.
Okay. With the leather, what animal is that coming from down there? Is it coming from?
Yeah, we use bovine leather, so
Okay.
it is cowhide.
Okay.
All of our leather is sourced from a single source in Colombia. The tannery that we work with is located in Colombia, and the tannery is actually a part owner in the slaughterhouse where we source the hides. So, yeah, the short answer is bovine leather, cowhide leather.
Bovine. Okay. And with the leather, the big thing that you guys have noticed is the vegetable tan leather versus the chrome tan leather. Is the chrome tan, is that something that's pretty common here in the United States?
Yeah, so unfortunately, not just in the United States, but globally, chrome tan leather accounts for 90% of leather in the world. Why I say unfortunately is the only difference between chrome tan leather and vegetable tan leather is the treatment and the processing of taking a cowhide and turning it into leather, which is called tanning the leather. So the verb tanning, oftentimes people associate that with the color of the leather, but it's actually a misnomer. Tanning the leather is the process of taking that from a cowhide and turning it into what we think of as usable leather. With chrome tan leather, the process involves toxic heavy metals and chemicals that are known to cause cancer among leather workers, are very hard to get out of wastewater and thus make their way into fresh water and into farmland, and can also actually be dangerous to the end leather user, myself or you, using a wallet or a pair of gloves or a pair of sandals, for example. So people can be allergic to some of the chemicals and toxins in the leather, can have skin rashes and reactions. And the reason that chrome tan leather has become so popular is kind of in line with what we see as this global race to the bottom, or this problem of convenience and price in the world, is that it's cheaper and it's faster to produce. Vegetable tan leather is made using natural tree tannins. So the trees that we're using to produce our leather are called quebracho, mimosa, and para. Quebracho is found in Argentina, Mimosa is found in Brazil, and Tara can be found in Ecuador and a few other countries in South America. So using the bark or the seeds from those trees, you can pulverize those seeds or that bark into a fine powder. And what you're doing is extracting the natural tannins inside those trees. The leather then takes, several weeks to finish, as opposed to chrome tan leather, which can be done within 1 day. So you're talking about a process for leather manufacturing of being, within a day you're done with chrome tan leather, or taking several weeks with vegetable tan leather. And so the cost difference is quite large, but chrome tan leather simply became popular because it was a cheaper, faster way to produce the leather. But before all of those chemicals were ever introduced and before that process became popularized during the Industrial Revolution, vegetable tan leather had been around quite a long time. Leather is one of those items that, humans have been using as a tool or as clothing for quite a long time. And so vegetable tan leather is sort of the original way that leather was produced, and unfortunately is now turning into more of a niche product or a dying art. So one of the reasons we chose to start with leather is just because we don't think most consumers know this story, and unfortunately, we personally don't think that's the consumer's fault. We think that we've sort of been lied to. If you look at the world of fashion, brands like, Gucci, Prada, will take very cheap chrome tan leather and market it as high-end, expensive, quote-unquote European leather. So it's just been sort of a long road of misinformation and deception by these brands that are making huge profit off of inexpensive, environmentally and human damaging leather. So we're here to kind of say, wait a minute, what are you actually getting when you buy leather from brands like this? And do you know what kinds of consequences come from, supporting that type of leather instead of supporting something like vegetable tan leather?
So you just mentioned all the reasons why vegetable tan leather is obviously the way to go, and all the reasons why chrome tan leather is kind of not good for everyone involved. Is there anyone that you know of in a grassroots campaign, or anyone out there trying to get some legislation? I just butchered that word, I'm sorry. Anyone out there just trying to make it known about how bad chrome tan leather is and why the consumer needs to know about it? Or is this something that all these companies are just trying to push underneath the rug?
Yes to both. It's definitely something these companies continue to try and push under the rug. For that reason, most chrome tan leather is actually produced in countries like India and Bangladesh, where, at least from the perspective of someone living in Europe or in the United States, it's sort of out of sight and out of mind. We don't see the environmental degradation that comes as a result, and we certainly don't understand the human cost firsthand. So brands are doing that very intentionally, keeping it away from us. But there is a lot of pushback coming from several large players. We've seen the European Union ban chrome tan leather in automobiles. One reason for that is that chromium-6 can actually transform under certain heat and temperature conditions to chromium-3, and chromium-3 is a known carcinogen. So we're seeing kind of large-scale institutions start to push back on this. With the grassroots movement, at least what I've seen is just an attack on leather itself. Not much of a differentiation between what kind of leather, and most of that tends to be from organizations like PETA or organizations that don't agree with the use of leather products in general. That's what I've seen, and yeah. So I think there is an awareness starting to come about with vegetable tan leather, but in the United States, from what I've seen, it's still a pretty niche product, with just those really in the leather industry understanding the nuances between the two.
So when you go to a shoe store, or say you're in Vail and you go to Chemo